Ladies and gentlemen, there is a very specific kind of heartbreak that doesn't end when the relationship ends. And if you're an empath who has loved an avoidant, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You're not just missing a person, you're carrying an entire emotional universe that you built around them. And what nobody tells you is this: even when an avoidant walks away, even when they swear they're done, even when they look like they've moved on, there is a bond with a true super empath that they cannot escape, because that bond was never just about time, attraction, or habit. It was about how you touched their nervous system, how you saw them, and how you loved them in a way they didn't even know they secretly needed. Let's start with you, the super empath. You're not just nice. You're not just too kind. You are someone who feels other people's emotions like weather on your own skin. You walk into a room and sense tension before a word is spoken. You know when someone is off even when they say, "I'm fine." You love in 360 degrees, not just with your attention, but with your intuition, your time, your energy, your patience. And when an avoidant crosses paths with you, it hits them on a level they don't understand at first. They've spent years keeping their heart behind frosted glass, never fully letting anyone in. People have seen the performance, the mask, the charm, the independence. But you saw past it. You heard the wobble in their voice when they talked about a parent who didn't show up. You saw the way their body stiffened when you got emotionally close. You noticed how they joked their way out of their own vulnerability. And instead of judging them or walking away, you stayed present, you leaned in, you tried to understand. That is not normal love to an avoidant. That is oxygen. When you are a true empath, especially a super empath, you don't just become someone's partner. You quietly become their emotional home, and that is exactly why an avoidant cannot fully escape the bond with you, even long after they walk away. Because you weren't just another person in their life, you were the place their nervous system finally exhaled. Think about what home really means for a moment. It is where you can take your shoes off, where you can be messy, where you don't have to perform every second, where your bad days are allowed to exist without being held against you forever. That is the role you slowly stepped into for them, not because they asked you to, but because your nature is to see beneath the surface and respond to what is really there. When they were exhausted after a long day, they didn't just text you out of habit. They texted you because they knew, consciously or not, that you would understand the tone behind the words, that you would hear, "I'm tired," and feel the whole emotional weight that story carried. When they sent you half sentences, you heard the full paragraphs they couldn't say out loud, and you held that for them, gently and consistently, in a world where they had mostly been expected to get over it and stay strong on their own. An avoidant often grows up in environments where their inner world is invisible or inconvenient, where showing need leads to shame, where reaching out leads to rejection or control. So they build walls, they learn to solve everything alone, and they treat closeness like a luxury they can only afford in tiny doses. Then along comes you, with your ridiculous, inconvenient, beautiful ability to feel them, even when they are trying not to be felt. You noticed when their messages got shorter, when their jokes got meaner, when their replies got slower, and instead of snapping, you asked, "Are you okay, really?" You remembered anniversaries of their pain, not just their milestones. You sent encouragement before they had to ask for it. You stayed on the phone with them when they were quiet, not needing them to entertain you, just willing to be there, so they did not have to sit in their head alone. That is what it means to become someone's emotional home. You don't just love the version of them that is easy, charming, and available. You hold the version that is shut down, confused, moody, and scared. And you keep the lights on even when they start pacing back and forth, unsure if they can stay. Because of this, their nervous system started to link your presence with relief, even if their conscious mind never said it. They might have rolled their eyes at your empathy sometimes. They might have called you too emotional. They might have acted like you cared too much, but notice what they did, not just what they said. They came to you with their secrets. They opened up to you after pretending they were fine with everyone else. They let you see them cry, or rage, or go flat, in ways they didn't show to casual connections. That is not random. That is their body trusting you before their mind knew how to honor that trust. When they walked into your space, whether it was your home, your car, or just a late-night call, their guard lowered in centimeters they didn't measure, And even when they later chose distance, those tiny softenings stayed etched inside them as, this is what it felt like to be understood. You also did something that made the bond even stronger. You adapted yourself around them, often more than you should have. You learned what topics triggered them, and tried to walk carefully. You adjusted your tone. You forgave their silences. You told yourself, they have been through a lot. I don't want to add to their pain. Your heart worked overtime to translate their coldness as fear rather than rejection. And while that cost you, it also deepened the imprint of you, because you were not just another person demanding love. You were someone making space for a wounded nervous system to exist. They may not have known how to receive that properly. They may not have reciprocated. They may even have abused that safety at times. But their body still logged the experience as different, as rare, as home. So when they leave, when their fear wins, and they choose distance over depth, they are not leaving an ordinary relationship. They are walking away from the only place where their heart got a taste of being fully seen and still wanted. And that is not something you just forget because you changed your mind. They can put new people in front of them. They can travel, work, scroll, and date. But whenever life gets quiet, whenever they feel misunderstood, whenever they are lying in bed after a hard day, some part of them remembers, without asking permission, the feeling of being emotionally held by you. The way your voice softened when they were low, the way your messages made them feel less alone. The way your presence steadied them when they were falling apart inside. That is why they cannot fully escape the bond with a super empath. You were not a chapter, you were a home. And even when they slam the door and walk out, their nervous system never forgets where. For a moment, it finally knew what it meant to exhale and belong. Your super empath wiring saw the wounded child beneath their defenses, because that is what you do naturally. You don't just look at a person's behavior, you feel the story behind it, and with an avoidant that becomes both the deepest bond and the deepest wound. Where most people only saw someone distant, inconsistent, and hard to read, you sense something softer underneath, a tired, scared version of them they never really learned how to protect. You noticed the way their eyes changed when certain topics came up, the way their body stiffened when emotions got too close, the way they made jokes right at the moment their voice almost cracked. And even when they pushed you away, you didn't just think, they're cold. You thought, they're scared. And that shift in perception made you relate to them differently than almost anyone else ever had. You heard the words they weren't saying when they snapped, I don't want to talk about it. Your heart heard, I don't know how to talk about it without falling apart. When they went silent for days, you didn't immediately see evil. You saw overwhelm. You could feel that somewhere in their past, reaching out for support meant being shamed, controlled, smothered, or abandoned. So distance became their automatic survival pattern, and instead of writing them off as selfish, you tried to hold them with more patience, more understanding, more gentleness. You remembered their stories, the offhand comments about a parent who never listened, the ex who weaponized their vulnerability, the childhood where emotions were either mocked or ignored, and your empathy stitched those fragments together into a bigger picture. It made sense to you, not because their behavior was okay, but because you could see the scared nervous system driving it. The way you loved them reflected that understanding. You didn't only respond to the mask, you responded to the kid behind it. When they got moody or withdrawn, you didn't think, they're trying to hurt me. You thought, they're overwhelmed, they're shutting down because they don't know how to regulate. So you soothed, you reassured, you said things like, it's okay, we don't have to fix everything tonight. I'm here when you're ready. Take your time. You were trying to be the presence they never had, the one that doesn't make big emotions feel dangerous, the one that doesn't punish them for needing space. And that is exactly why their body relaxed with you in ways it didn't with others. They unconsciously recognized that you were not just another person demanding performance. You were someone who could feel their internal storm and not run from it. But this same gift is also what made the bond so intense, because once your empathy picked up on their wounds, you didn't just care, you took responsibility. You began to feel like leaving them would be abandoning that inner child all over again. You told yourself, they've already been hurt so much, I can't be another person who gives up on them. And without even noticing, you started carrying more than your share. You tolerated mixed signals because you knew they were scared. You forgave emotional absences because you knew they were triggered. You minimized your own pain because you were so tuned in to their pain. That is what super empaths do when they are unprotected. They turn their insight into a reason to stay, even when it hurts. Their sensitivity to the wounded child makes them ignore the adult behavior that is actually injuring them in the present. The avoidant felt this difference. They may not have had the language for it, but they knew that you understood them on a level that other people didn't. They knew they could say less, and you would still get it. They knew they could fail to explain themselves, and you would still sit there trying to decode the pattern. And that made you feel irreplaceable to them, even if they never said it. On bad days, you became the person they reached for, the one they vented to, the one they trusted with pieces of their story, not because they suddenly became secure, but because their nervous system respected the way you handled their fragility. You didn't shame it. You didn't mock it. You didn't expose it. And for someone who has spent their life protecting that fragile inner child, that kind of safety is unforgettable. The painful part is this: seeing the wounded child beneath their defenses does not automatically mean they are ready to heal. Your empathy allowed you to see why they are the way they are, but it could not force them to take responsibility for changing it. And that's where many super empaths lose themselves. They mistake deep understanding for destiny. They think, because I understand your wounds, I'm meant to stay no matter how you treat me. But in reality, your gift was never meant to be used against you. It was meant to give you clarity. Clarity that yes, they are wounded. Yes, their avoidance has a story. And yes, you can feel compassion for that. But also clarity that the wounded child inside them is not allowed to keep wounding the child inside you. That is why they can't escape the bond. Your super empath wiring met them at a depth very few people reach. You saw the most hidden parts of them, and still cared. And once someone has been loved on that level, even if they run, even if they sabotage, even if they go silent, the nervous system never really forgets the one person who looked past the armor, saw the bruise underneath, and said with their presence, I see you, and in my world, you were never too much. They ran to protect themselves, not because you weren't enough. And if you can really let that sink into your bones, a huge part of the shame you've been carrying will finally start to loosen its grip, because what happened between you and this avoidant wasn't a verdict on your worth. It was a reflection of their capacity. Avoidants don't run from unworthy love, they run from intense, honest, exposing love that asks their heart to come out from behind the walls it has lived behind for years. And that is exactly the kind of love you gave. You stepped into their life with open eyes and an open chest. You listened, you cared, you attached, you hoped, and that level of emotional presence shines the brightest light on the very parts of themselves they've spent a lifetime avoiding. So when it got too real, they did the only thing their nervous system knows how to do when it feels cornered. It fled. Not because you were too little, but because, for them, you were too closey. When you replay the ending in your head, you probably hear all the words they didn't say out loud. The, you're too much. The, I need space. The, I'm not ready. The, it's not you, it's me. And even if they never used those exact sentences, your mind filled in the gaps and turned their distance into a story about your lack of value. You told yourself, if I had been calmer, if I had been prettier, if I had asked for less, if I had been more chill, they would have stayed, and that story has been gnawing at you. But if you zoom out, you can see the truth in their pattern. It isn't just with you. They have a history of pulling away when intimacy deepens. They have a pattern of losing interest after the honeymoon, of shutting down when emotions get complicated, of choosing distraction over depth. And all you did, as a super empath, was intensify the spotlight on that inner pattern. When you gave more love, their fear had more to react to. When you got closer, their defenses had more to fight. It was never a fair test of your worth. It was a test of their capacity to tolerate real connection. Inside them, there is a very old belief, often born in childhood, that closeness equals danger. Maybe they watched love turn controlling. Maybe their needs were mocked or ignored. Maybe every time they leaned in, the person they leaned on let them fall, so their nervous system formed a rule. Don't need, don't depend, don't rely. And that rule got buried so deeply that, as adults, they don't even realize it's running the show. Then you show up with your warmth and your sincerity and your annoying habit of actually caring, and for a moment, that rule is challenged, they feel comfort with you. They feel seen, they feel held, and a tiny part of them thinks, maybe I can finally relax. But another part screams, no, this is dangerous. If I relax here, I'll be hurt again. And eventually, that screaming part wins. That is what you experienced as them pulling away, going cold, shutting down, ending things. It feels personal, and the pain is real. But the engine behind that behavior was not a measured evaluation of your value as a partner. It was a scared system trying to survive. Think about how they behaved right before things broke. They may have started arguments out of nowhere, picking fights over small things. They may have criticized you more, suddenly finding faults that were never a problem before. They may have become hyper-focused on your flaws, your tone, your needs, your messages, anything they could latch onto and say, see, this is why it can't work. Because if they can make you the problem, they don't have to face the terrifying idea that they are walking away from something good. Blaming you is a shield. It hurts you, but it also protects them from having to sit in the truth. I am leaving not because this is bad, but because I am scared of how good and vulnerable this could become. When you are a super empath, you feel that under the surface, which is why part of you wanted to shout, I know you're scared, just stay. And another part of you felt shattered, because the person you were willing to fight for chose a story that protected their fear instead of protecting the bond. Even after they leave, the way they frame the breakup is often more about self-protection than about reality. They might downplay what you had, act casual, pretend they barely think of you, tell people it was getting messy. And you hear that and think, so, I was just a face. But the truth is that minimization is another defense. It is easier for them to make your connection small than to admit, I walked away from someone who saw me and still chose me, and that admission would force them to face their own sabotage. Avoidants don't escape the bond with a super empath because, deep down, their body knows the difference between running from toxicity and running from love. They can numb it, ignore it, bury it under business, but in the quiet, they know. And the more you take their leaving as proof that you were fundamentally unworthy, the more you miss that crucial distinction. They didn't run because you weren't enough. They ran because being enough in your presence demanded a level of emotional courage they haven't learned yet. Your work now is to stop cooperating with the lie their fear wrote about you, to stop repeating, if I were better, they would have stayed, and start telling the truer sentence, I loved someone whose capacity could not hold what I bring. It doesn't erase the pain, but it relocates the blame. You don't have to hate them to see this clearly. You can hold compassion for their wounds and still acknowledge the damage done to yours. You can grieve the beautiful parts. You can miss the connection. You can remember the softness and still refuse to translate their escape into a verdict on your worth. They protected themselves the only way they knew how, by running from the fire, not realizing the fire was the warmth of a love that might have healed them if they'd stayed, and that truth belongs to them, not to you. When you are a super empath, what you give in a connection is not ordinary, and that is exactly why, after an avoidant leaves, every new connection they step into feels thinner compared to what you gave, because what you offered was not just romance. It was emotional depth, memory, attunement, and safety, layered over time in a way that casual dating simply cannot replicate. While you were together, they often didn't register this consciously. They got used to it. They treated your presence like background music, always there, always steady, always available when their world felt heavy. But once they walk away and enter other dynamics, the contrast begins to show up quietly, and it does not favor the new people the way their ego might have expected. In the beginning, they might feel a rush with someone new. There is novelty, attraction, the thrill of not having to answer hard questions, the relief of not feeling so exposed. They tell themselves, this is easier. There is no drama, no intensity. And for a little while, that feels like a win. But then life starts happening, real life, with stress, disappointment, long days, family issues, self-doubt. And this is where the bond with you refuses to disappear. Because the new person might be fun, might be charming, might be attractive, but they don't know how to sit in the dark with them the way you did. They don't remember the details the way you did. They don't hear the tone changes the way you did. They react to the surface. You responded to the soul. They vent about work to someone new and get a simple reply. Yeah, that sucks, which is normal, polite, fine, but their body remembers how you replied, with, "That's the third time your boss did that. Are you okay? This is wearing you down." And in that moment, without trying, your memory drops in, because you didn't just acknowledge the event, you tracked the pattern. You cared about the impact, and that level of emotional witnessing cannot be replaced by small talk and emojis. They go out on a date. There is laughter, maybe physical chemistry, but there is no shared history yet. No, remember that night we stayed up until 3 a.m. talking about your biggest fear. No, I know why that comment hurt you so much. No, I can see you shutting down right now. And while the newness distracts them, in the quieter moments afterward, something inside feels flat, like eating cotton candy when they are used to real food. The same thing happens with small rituals. Where your presence used to live, they get sick and someone sends a quick, "Get well soon." But their nervous system remembers how you checked on them multiple times in a day, how you offered to bring medicine, how you got worried when they didn't respond, not in a controlling way, but in a, "Your well-being matters to me" way, and suddenly the new person's effort feels light, almost superficial, not because they are bad, but because they are not invested at the emotional depth you were. They post something vulnerable, and replies roll in, but none of them land like your old message, the one where you would have said, "I know this took a lot for you to share. I'm proud of you." And the quiet ache they feel is not just missing you, it is missing the quality of care you embodied. Over time, this creates a split inside them. On the surface they may claim they have moved on, that they prefer something less heavy, that things are chill now, but their body disagrees, their body compares. Their body remembers the way their chest loosened after talking to you, the way anxiety dropped a level when you said, "I'm here." The way their shoulders softened in your presence, and when they lie awake next to someone who doesn't know them like that, or alone in a bed that used to feel less empty, because you were on the phone with them. They feel the thinness of what they are holding now. It might look good online, it might seem calm on the outside, but inside there is this nagging realization, this doesn't touch me as deeply, this doesn't hold me the way they did. That is why they can laugh, flirt, have fun, and still not shake you, because anyone can give attention, very few can give attunement, anyone can say, "I like you." Very few can say, "I see your patterns, your pain, your defenses, and I'm still here, but I won't lose myself for them." Anyone can enjoy their highlight reel, very few can sit with their shadows without running. You did that, over and over, and their nervous system cannot unknow what it felt like. So every new connection, no matter how shiny, has to stand next to the memory of you. And when life gets quiet, when the filters drop, and when they are left alone with their thoughts, the difference between casual attention and the rare emotional safety you provided becomes impossible to ignore. And that difference is exactly why the bond with a super empath is not something they simply walk away from. It is something they keep bumping into. In every relationship that never quite reaches the depth you once gave them so freely. They push you away behaviorally, but your imprint stays in their system, because what their hands, their words, and their choices are doing on the surface is not the full story of what their body and their deeper mind are holding on to, and that is where you still live, even after they leave. When an avoidant pulls back, blocks, ignores, ends things, or suddenly becomes busy. What you see is rejection. What you feel is abandonment. What your brain hears is, "You don't matter." But inside them something completely different is happening. Their defenses are pushing, while their nervous system is remembering. And that tension is exactly why they can behave like you never existed, yet still be quietly haunted by you long after. They may stop